Chapter 1. The Monastery of the Emperor's Luminescence. Perched high on the Kragos peaks, the Monastery of the Emperor's Luminescence stood as a testimony to both human engineering and unwavering faith. Its spires, built from white seraphite stones, gleamed in the sunlight, reflecting rays so intensely that from a distance it appeared as if the very mountain-top was ablaze with divine fire. The main gate, carved with intricate scenes of the Emperor's greatest battles and benevolent moments, stood guarded day and night by the Order's most vigilant. These great doors of aged oak and reinforced steel had withstood both time and assaults, bearing scars, yet never yielding. As one ventured inside, the echoing footsteps on the cobblestone pathway were often the first thing one noticed. The path led to the central courtyard, a meticulously maintained garden with vibrant flowers from planets across the galaxy. In its heart stood a majestic fountain, its waters believed to be blessed by the Emperor himself. Pilgrims would often journey for months, seeking the solace and blessings these waters offered. Flanking the garden were the living quarters of the Sisters, built in a semicircular fashion, each window framed with stained glass that depicted various saints of the Adepta Sororitas. The air here was always thick with the aroma of incense wafting from the grand cathedral at the far end of the monastery. This cathedral, the heart of the monastery, was an architectural marvel. Vaulted ceilings adorned with golden mosaics showcased the tales of the Emperor's grace. Long, polished pews made of Moravian wood lined the hall, leading to the grand altar where a statue of the Emperor towered over all, his gaze stern yet compassionate. To the left of the cathedral stood the librarium, housing scriptures and records dating back millennia. Its tall shelves, filled with scrolls and texts, bore knowledge that few outside the monastery's walls were privy to. Opposite the librarium was the Hall of Training, where the Battle Sisters honed their martial skills, the rhythmic chants of their drills often blending with the sermons from the cathedral. Yet for all its grandeur, the monastery's true essence lay in its inhabitants. The Sisters of Battle, in their power armor, moved with a purpose, their dedication evident in every task, be it in prayer or in combat training. Their voices, united in songs of worship, echoed throughout the peaks, a sonic testament to their unwavering devotion. In this sanctuary, amidst the beauty of faith and nature, a sense of serenity prevailed, making it hard to believe that outside its walls, the galaxy was torn by endless strife. But the Sisters of the Emperor's Luminescence remained vigilant, for they knew that faith was both their shield and weapon. Chapter 2. Whispers of Corruption. Beneath the serene exterior of the Monastery of the Emperor's Luminescence, tensions bubbled. Sister Amalia, the Order's chief librarian, had stumbled upon a series of old prophecies that hinted at an impending darkness. Her fingers delicately traced the ancient runes inscribed on a tattered scroll she'd found hidden deep within the librarium's catacombs. The words, written in a forgotten dialect, whispered of a seductive power that would seek to corrupt the very heart of the Emperor's faithful. Curiously, as Amalia read, she felt a strange sensation, a gentle tugging at the fringes of her consciousness. It was as if the scroll itself was alive, pulsating with a dark energy. Shaking off the feeling, she summoned Sister Verena, an expert in ancient dialects. The two pored over the scroll for hours, their brows furrowing as they decoded its cryptic messages. Verena's normally calm and composed face showed signs of worry. "This speaks of Slaanesh," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Amalia's eyes widened. Slaanesh, the Prince of Pleasure, was known for seducing even the most devout with promises of power and ecstasy. The prophecy told of a time when the skies above the Kragos peaks would darken, not with clouds, but with the daemonic legions of Slaanesh, seeking entry into the mortal realm. The monastery, with its intense beacon of faith, would act as a magnet, drawing the forces of corruption to it. While the two sisters grappled with the weight of their discovery, far below the monastery, in the dark tunnels of the mountain, something stirred. The natural caverns, once used by the sisters for meditation, had in recent times been sealed off due to reports of strange echoing whispers and an unsettling feeling of being watched. Unknown to the sisters, these caverns had become a conduit for the warp, the chaotic dimension where entities like Slaanesh dwelled. Slowly, the barriers between the realms weakened, and the first of the demonic entities began to seep through, their forms not yet solid, but their intentions clear. They fed off the suppressed doubts and fears of the sisters, growing stronger with each passing day. Back in the librarium, Amalia and Verena knew they had to warn the canoness, the monastery's leader. They hurriedly made their way to her chambers, the weight of the ancient scroll heavy in their hands. As they walked, the very walls of the monastery seemed to close in on them, the once familiar chants of their fellow sisters now sounding eerily distorted. Canoness Seraphine, a battle-hardened veteran with a keen strategic mind, listened intently as they relayed their findings. Her face, usually a mask of stoic resolve, betrayed a hint of concern. She knew that if the prophecies were true, they were facing a threat unlike any before. "The monastery has withstood countless invasions," she mused, her gaze distant, "but this is a battle not just for our lives, but for our very souls." Determined to protect their sacred home and the beacon of faith it represented, the three sisters began devising a plan to fortify the monastery, all the while knowing that their true test would be resisting the seductive whispers of the Prince of Pleasure. The battle for the monastery of the Emperor's luminescence was about to begin. Chapter 3. The Seductive Shadows. As the Kragos Peak's skies darkened, casting long, eerie shadows across the monastery of the Emperor's luminescence, an oppressive atmosphere settled. The usually pristine air, which tasted of ice and purity, now carried a cloying, sweet scent, reminiscent of forbidden pleasures and hedonistic dreams. The Sisters of Battle, disciplined and trained to withstand physical adversaries, found themselves battling an unseen enemy, their own desires and fears. Whispers danced on the wind, promises of power, tales of forgotten loves, and the lures of unfulfilled ambitions. Each sister, in her private moments, grappled with her own temptations. Sister Leora, known for her unbreakable faith, found herself entranced by visions of a life where she wasn't bound by the strictures of the order. She saw herself as the ruler of vast lands, her every wish being the command of countless followers. The allure of such power was intoxicating. In another part of the monastery, Sister Helena, a healer and nurturer, was tormented by the cries of those she couldn't save in past battles. Their voices, full of pain and accusation, questioned her faith and her skills. Was she truly serving the Emperor or merely her own pride? Canoness Seraphine, in her private chambers, faced her own demons. Visions of her younger days, mistakes made, opportunities lost, and loves forsaken played before her eyes. She saw a life where she chose love over duty, passion over discipline, the warm embrace of a loved one, the laughter of children, a life far removed from the rigors of the order. While the sisters battled their innermost desires, outside the very fabric of reality seemed to warp. Ethereal figures, shimmering in riotous purples and pinks, began to manifest. These daemons of Slaanesh, embodiments of pleasure and excess, began their seductive dance around the monastery, their ethereal voices joining the chorus of whispers. It was in these trying times that Sister Verena, using her deep knowledge of ancient texts, identified a potential counter to this insidious invasion. Deep within the monastery's catacombs lay a relic, the Aegis of Purity, said to amplify the faith of those around it, providing a protective barrier against the corruptive influences of the warp. Canoness Seraphine, rallying her sisters, announced a mission to retrieve the Aegis. Forming a protective phalanx, a select group ventured deep into the catacombs, their path illuminated by the soft glow of their faith-imbued lanterns. All around them the walls seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, but the sisters pressed on, their voices united in a hymn to the Emperor, a beacon of hope in the encroaching darkness. However, the deeper they went, the stronger the seductive pull became. Some sisters faltered, their steps slowing as visions of alternative lives played before their eyes. It was Sister Amalia's unwavering faith and her intimate knowledge of the catacombs that kept them on the path. But as they neared the chamber housing the Aegis of Purity, they found it guarded not by physical barriers, but by their own deepest fears and desires made manifest. Each sister had to confront and overcome her own personal daemon to gain access. Outside, as the daemons grew bolder, drawing ever closer to the monastery's walls, inside, the battle for the very souls of the sisters raged on. Would they retrieve the Aegis in time to turn the tide? Only their faith and unity would determine their fate. Chapter 4. The Battle for the Soul. The monastery of the Emperor's luminescence was a beacon of light and faith in a darkened galaxy. Its thick walls had withstood countless sieges and assaults, but never before had they faced an enemy quite like this. The demonic forces of Slaanesh did not just batter against the stone, they seeped into every crack, whispering sweet nothings and corruptive seductions, aiming to break not just the physical barriers, but the very spirit of the sisters within. Outside, the ground seemed to pulse with a life of its own. From the ethereal mists arose writhing, serpentine figures and Daemonettes, their lithe forms adorned with razor-sharp claws and mesmerizing, multifaceted eyes. These daemons danced and sang, their voices a cacophony of promises and desires, all aimed at weakening the resolve of the Sisters of Battle. Sisters Clarissa and Marianne manned the outer battlements, bolters at the ready. They trained their weapons on the approaching horde, their fingers itching at the triggers. But the sights that met their eyes were not of daemonic monstrosities, but of lost loved ones, beckoning them to join in the dance and abandon their posts. It was a testament to their unwavering faith and discipline that the sisters shook off the illusions and fired their bolters. Bright lances of light shot out, piercing the ranks of the daemons. However, every daemon felled seemed to give rise to two more, an ever-growing tide of corruption. Within the monastery's sacred halls, the battle was no less intense. Daemons had breached the inner sanctum, their laughter echoing off the ancient walls. Sister Isabella, a renowned swordswoman, met the invaders with her power sword's glowing blade, cutting swathes through the enemy. But every swing, every kill, was accompanied by a whispered temptation, a promise of power and pleasure beyond imagining if she would but lay down her weapon. At the heart of the monastery stood the grand chapel, a testament to the Emperor's glory. Here, Canoness Seraphine led the defense. But as the daemons drew near, the very icons and statues dedicated to the Emperor began to twist and warp, reflecting not his divine countenance, but the leering visage of Slaanesh. It was here that the Sisters Repentia made their stand. These sisters, seeking redemption for past sins, were a force to be reckoned with. Their faith, burning brighter than any, was a beacon in this dire hour. Led by Mistress Zephyra, a veteran of countless campaigns, the Repentia charged. Their eviscerator chainswords roared to life, tearing through demon flesh. They sang hymns of redemption, their voices rising above the din of battle, a chorus of defiance against the dark. As the battle raged on, the tide seemed to turn. The combined might of the Sisters of Battle, their faith and determination, pushed the daemonic invaders back. Every inch of ground was contested, every fallen sister avenged tenfold. But the battle was far from over. The demonic forces, sensing the threat posed by the Repentia, focused their assault on them. Waves of Daemonettes, their claws dripping with venom, descended upon the repentant sisters. It was a fierce and brutal confrontation, the air thick with the scent of blood and brimstone. But the Repentia, driven by their desire for redemption and the guidance of Mistress Zephyra, held their ground. Their chainswords bit deep, their faith unyielding. As dawn began to break, piercing the darkened skies, the last of the daemonic forces were driven back. The monastery of the Emperor's luminescence, though scarred and battered, stood triumphant. In the aftermath, the Sisters Repentia were honored for their bravery and sacrifice. Mistress Zephyra, her armor dented and her body weary, knelt before Canoness Seraphine, offering her chainsword in service to the Emperor. The battle was won, but the war against corruption and temptation would never end. The Sisters of Battle, united in faith and purpose, would always stand ready to defend the Emperor's realm. Chapter 5. Reflection and Renewal. The acrid smell of burnt promethium and decay still lingered in the air, and the haunting echoes of the battle slowly dissipated from the stone walls of the monastery of the Emperor's luminescence. Battle-worn and scarred, the monastery now bore the marks of the daemonic invasion, a testament to the fierce battle that had raged within and outside its walls. Sisters Clarissa and Marianne, weary yet steadfast, were tasked with the grim duty of identifying and collecting the fallen. Each body was draped in a shroud, their faces bearing an expression of defiance even in death. The two sisters worked in solemn silence, their hearts heavy but filled with pride. They whispered prayers, ensuring that their fallen comrades' souls would be guided to the Emperor's side. Inside the monastery, the once grand and pristine halls were smeared with ash and blood. Battle-scarred murals of the Emperor's glorious battles and divine interventions looked down upon the weary survivors as they moved about, attending to the wounded and beginning the immense task of repairing the damages. Sister Isabella, her armor stained and power sword still humming with residual energy, was in the infirmary helping the injured sisters. Each bandage applied and prayer whispered was a reaffirmation of their shared bond, a testament to their undying faith. Canoness Seraphine, a beacon of strength and leadership during the battle, was in the grand chapel. The room had been the epicenter of the daemonic onslaught, and now, under the canoness's guidance, sisters worked tirelessly to cleanse and reconsecrate the sacred space. Incense burners filled the chapel with sweet-smelling smoke, their fragrant tendrils curling upwards as chants of purification filled the air. Mistress Zephyra and the Sisters Repentia, the heroes of the battle, were in the monastery's inner courtyard. Here, a makeshift memorial had been erected, honoring the sacrifices made by their order. Zephyra, her face etched with the weight of leadership and the scars of battle, stood at the center of the Repentia, leading them in a song of mourning and hope. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the monastery in a golden hue, the entire order gathered for a grand vigil. A massive pyre, made up of the weapons and banners of their fallen sisters, was set ablaze. The flames, reaching skywards, were a beacon of hope and a symbol of rebirth. Canoness Seraphine stepped forward, her voice clear and resolute. "Sisters, we have faced the darkness and emerged victorious. Our faith has been tested, and we have proven ourselves worthy in the Emperor's eyes. But let us not forget the sacrifices made, the lives lost. We must honor their memories, continue their legacy, and ensure that the light of the Emperor shines brighter than ever." The night was filled with songs, prayers, and shared memories. Sisters laughed, cried, and found solace in one another's company. As dawn approached, a renewed sense of purpose filled their hearts. The monastery of the Emperor's luminescence, though scarred, would shine brighter than ever. Its walls would bear witness to the unyielding faith of the Sisters of Battle, a beacon of hope in a galaxy filled with darkness. Chapter 6. Echoes of a Dark Tide. The days that followed the siege saw the Sisters of the Monastery of the Emperor's Luminescence in a flurry of activities. Though the immediate demonic threat had been thwarted, they were fully aware that the shadow of Slaanesh still loomed in the periphery. They could not afford to let their guard down. Sister Anastasia, the monastery's chief librarian, busied herself with the task of documenting the siege. Her quill danced over parchment, recording every detail of the attack from the first sighting of the daemonic horde to the valiant stand of the Sisters Repentia. The chronicles would serve as a reminder to all sisters of the treacherous nature of chaos and the importance of eternal vigilance. In the catacombs beneath the monastery, Canoness Seraphine, accompanied by Mistress Zephyra, began an investigation into how the demonic forces had managed to breach their hallowed grounds. The catacombs were a labyrinthine network of tunnels and chambers, housing ancient relics and tombs of fallen heroes. Their descent into the cold, echoing depths was filled with unease. The ever-present luminescent glyphs on the walls, imbued with protective wards, seemed to pulsate with a dimmer light, hinting at a residual taint. Deep within, they discovered a chamber, long sealed and forgotten, its entrance now lying broken. Inside, a shimmering, unstable portal pulsated with malevolent energy, its edges fringed with unholy runes. Realization dawned upon Seraphine. This was no ordinary portal, but a direct rift to the realm of Slaanesh. "The heretics," Zephyra whispered, her voice edged with anger. "They must have known about this portal and sought to widen it, allowing the demonic forces a passage." They knew what had to be done. With prayers to the Emperor, the duo worked tirelessly, using every ounce of their faith and knowledge to seal the rift. Hours felt like days, but the portal's sinister glow began to wane, and finally, with a blinding flash, it was sealed. The catacombs fell silent, the weight of the darkness lifted. Emerging from the depths, Seraphine and Zephyra shared their discovery with the rest of the Order. The realization that heretics had infiltrated and used the forgotten chamber was a blow to the Order's pride. They resolved to fortify their defences further, ensuring that no weak point would be left vulnerable. Sister Beatrice, the Order's chief engineer, oversaw the construction of new defence measures. Massive bastions rose, equipped with heavy bolters and reinforced ceramite. Walls were thickened, and every entrance to the monastery had its defences tripled. Patrols were increased, and no stone was left unturned in the quest to root out any remaining heretical influence. The chapel was restored to its former glory, and a new statue of the Emperor, twice the size of the last, was erected, symbolizing the Order's renewed faith and resilience. The Sisters Repentia, under Mistress Zephira's guidance, began training even more rigorously, pushing their limits and honing their skills to perfection. The echoes of the dark tide had left an indelible mark on the monastery of the Emperor's luminescence, but in its aftermath, the Order emerged stronger, more united and resolute in their purpose. Their faith in the Emperor was unbreakable, and they stood ready to face any threat that dared challenge the light of the Imperium. Chapter 7. The Price of Redemption. The aftermath of the siege brought more than just physical reconstruction and increased vigilance. The spiritual and emotional toll was significant, and many sisters bore scars that were not visible to the naked eye. The most affected were the Sisters Repentia, who, after turning the tide of the battle, now grappled with a newfound respect and admiration from their fellow sisters, juxtaposed with their own internal struggles of penance and self-worth. The Gardens of Reflection, previously a serene oasis amidst the austere architecture of the monastery, became a haven for those seeking solace and understanding. Here, among fragrant rose bushes and softly murmuring fountains, many a sister could be found deep in meditation or softly chanting prayers to the Emperor for guidance. One afternoon, as golden sunlight dappled the marble pathways, Mistress Zephira found herself approached by Sister Lysandra, one of the Sisters Repentia. Lysandra's gaze was downcast, her usually fiery spirit quenched. She hesitated for a moment, then began, "Mistress, ever since that day, I find myself lost. Our victory, the praises, they feel undeserved. My past sins weigh heavily upon me still." Zephira, understanding the depth of the conflict within Lysandra, replied softly, "Redemption is not a singular event, Lysandra. It is a journey. The Emperor sees your bravery, your sacrifice, but it's essential to reconcile with oneself." Lysandra's eyes shimmered with tears. "But how, mistress? How do I find that balance between seeking redemption and accepting the light the Emperor has shone upon us?" Zephira paused, looking at the reflection pools where the visage of the great Emperor shimmered. "You must understand that the path to redemption is not about forgetting or negating your past. It's about embracing it, learning from it, and letting it fuel your drive to serve the Emperor. The past cannot be changed, but the future is yet to be written." Over the following weeks, Zephira initiated a series of spiritual sessions, not just for the Sisters Repentia, but for all who felt the need. These gatherings, often held in the garden or the chapel, became a place for open dialogue, reflection, and mutual support. Through shared stories of struggles, moments of doubts, and personal revelations, the bonds between the sisters grew stronger. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in hues of amber and gold, the sisters formed a circle within the chapel. In its centre, a brazier burned with blue flames, representing the unwavering spirit of the Emperor. One by one, sisters came forward, speaking of their burdens, their hopes, and casting into the fire an emblem of their past, a token, a letter, a symbol. As the items turned to ash, it symbolized a release, a step forward in their path of spiritual growth. As the ceremony concluded, the air was thick with emotion. Sister Lysandra, her face glowing with newfound determination, stepped forward, her voice echoing in the vast chapel. "We are the Emperor's chosen, his beacon in the galaxy's darkest hours. We will carry our past not as shackles, but as lessons. We will shine brighter, for we have known the darkness and emerged from it, guided by his divine light." The words resonated deeply, and a chorus of affirmations rose. The monastery of the Emperor's luminescence was not just a fortress of stone and faith, It was a sanctuary for souls seeking purpose and redemption in the Emperor's name. Of course, let's condense Chapter 8 while retaining its essence. Chapter 8. Redemption's Echo. The monastery's grand hall echoed with both the desperate prayers of the sisters and the deranged laughter of Slaaneshi daemons. Sister Miriam, though wounded, stood resolute, her gaze meeting that of the Keeper of Secrets leading the demonic horde. Across the hall, Sisters Repentia emerged from the shadows, their raw penance becoming a beacon of hope. With every step, they chanted their lamentations louder, each word cutting through the chaos like a blade. As if responding to their collective will, a blinding light radiated from the statue of the Emperor at the hall's center. The Keeper of Secrets, sensing a shift in power, focused its malice on the Repentia, but Sister Miriam and her remaining battle sisters formed a protective line around them. The tide began to turn. The previously indomitable Slaaneshi forces recoiled as the combined faith and determination of the sisters began to repel them. The climax arrived when the lead, Sister Repentia, with her chainsword glowing with a divine aura, faced the Keeper of Secrets. Their clash was short but intense, the culmination of the monastery's long ordeal. With a final heavenward cry, she struck down the Keeper, its form dissipating into the ether. The surviving daemons, leaderless and overwhelmed, began to retreat. The sisters of the Emperor's Benediction, though battered and bruised, stood victorious, their faith unyielding.